I heard something from my doctor a few months back that I never thought that I'd hear. She looked at me and looked at the symptoms that I was presenting and said, you know what? We're having a convention on this very thing, and you could be part of the keynote address.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, no.
Evidently, whatever was happening to me, and by the way, it was fine. Everything's okay. I'm not going to die. But whatever was happening to me, not only it wasn't typical, but she looked at it and said, this actually should not and cannot be happening. and yet it is. She says, we're having a convention in just a couple months. And she goes, we could do a centerpiece presentation just on. She actually got my permission to release some of my documents in case she wanted to do. She said, you could be the star of the convention, not personally, but my data could be. And I looked at my doctor, who I really respect, and I said, I'm just competitive enough that the thought of that thrills me, and just barely smart enough that the thought of that terrifies me.
Yeah, I know. By the way, I'm not at all laughing at you because I've had the exact same thing happen to me about a decade ago. But when a doctor says this to you, you a little bit hear circus music in the background of da 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 da. He's like, why is this happening to me that I went for a diagnosis? Yeah. And in my case, my doctor looked at me and he goes, wow, I've never actually seen this outside of a medical book. Do you mind if I write you up in a paper? And I was like, oh dear God, oh my God, not what I wanted to hear. Like in my case, my specific thing, I went to a neurologist because this was from drawing actually, so it's relevant to the show. I had rolled my shoulder forward so much that I got costoclavicular syndrome in my shoulder. Yeah. Anyway, the weirdest part about it is my nerves got so messed up that if you touched not my ear, but the tiny little hairs on the edge of my ear, I would feel it in my fingertips. That's how messed up my nerves would be. And my neurologist is like, oh, I'm so excited. I've never actually seen this in real life. I've read about this, but I've never actually seen this. Do you mind if I put you into a paper? And I was like, yeah, that's fine. I support medical science, but not what I wanted to hear. Today's doctor visit was like, hey, congratulations, you're going to be in a medical paper.
You feel like you're going to be part of the freak show now. Come and see the goat-headed boy, That's great. I'll be there waving back at you.
Everyone, hey, nurse, come in and touch this man's ear hairs. And on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to ComicLab, the show about making comics.
And making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the author of the Webcomics Handbook and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his pal Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/ComicLab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. We're coming up on the end of the year. And so just a heads up to everyone, we're going to do a show in the weeks ahead where we recap what our 2022 predictions and sort of forecasting was and how that went out. And then in the new year, you're going to get a show with our new goals for predictions for the year and also our new 1, 3, and 5 year goals. Yeah. And also in that timeline, you're going to get the live show from Schultz right around the new year. But for today, Brad, we got a big show to jump into. And what do we got first for everybody?
Well, yeah, I actually had a topic I wanted to start out with because it's something that hit me. Actually, I was reading a piece on /film.com about Treasure Planet. They said it was Disney Animation's biggest ever flop, which kills me because if you've ever watched that movie, it's a really darn good movie.
Oh, is it? By the way, I thought Strange World, their new one, was the worst critically acclaimed movie they've had in animation.
I'm not sure where Strange World fits in there, but in terms of box office failures, /Film was saying that Treasure Planet was absolutely their biggest flop and really, sent them into a tailspin. Anyway, this topic has nothing to do with Treasure Planet other than if you are looking for something to watch and something you might have slept on. Treasure Planet, really, really fantastic and beautiful 2D animation. And they had made some advances for the movie. It was I think at the time, the biggest budget that they had put on for a movie. So don't sleep on Treasure Planet, but that doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about today.
Just something to note in passing. But yeah, so you were gonna talk about Treasure Planet and how it is coming back around again from Slash Planet, the Slash film.
No, this has nothing to do with Treasure Planet.
Oh, okay.
But it does have to do with the way this writer, a point that the writer made in writing this piece. And what the writer said was this. It said that the typical gap for time for nostalgia to take root in the public consciousness is 20 years. Wow. Consider how the 70s were rife with the rose-tinted fondness for the 50s, with the popularity of Grease and Happy Days. Nostalgia for the 1980s hit hard in the early 2000s. And I'm reading this and I'm like, oh, that means that we might be right now in the perfect phase and the perfect space, and especially with the social media pendulum seeming to swing backwards a little bit. Mm-hmm. My question to you, Dave Kellett, is this. Are we in a perfect spot and opportunity for webcomics nostalgia?
Wow, what an interesting question that I had never in my life considered. I've never thought about this in terms of comics. But I'll tell you what, can I reinforce this from a totally different industry? As people might remember, I used to work at Mattel Toys, and Mattel actually used to have a 25-year prompt where if a toy was popular 25 years ago, there was a legitimate nostalgia factor for parents who, like, I played with this when I was 8. I want my 8-year-old to play with it. And so Mattel would literally bring back toys from 25 years ago because now those kids could play with what their parents played with, right? And so you saw a resurgence with Transformers, G.I. Joe, Polly Pocket, Cabbage Patch Kids, all this sort of thing from 25 years earlier. So that's just to reinforce that this is a legitimate thing that a lot of corporations for emotional nostalgia value lean into. Now, the question about webcomics is bonkers. Now, are you thinking about it more from a technical standpoint or more from a reading standpoint of like, oh, I miss blankety blank, the comic that I read 20 years ago?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that popped into my mind, because this has been such a top of mind thing for me for the last several weeks, has been technical. In other words, my first thought was, and it's stuff that you've heard me say on the show in the previous several episodes. Number one, it really does seem as if the social media pendulum is swinging backwards a little bit, or swinging away from being so strongly towards social media.
Right.
Elon Musk can say that Twitter's usage rates are up and that, they've got the highest volume ever. But let's face it, Elon Musk has 44 billion reasons to stretch the truth on that if he wanted to. He's got a real motive for doing that. So I take that with a grain of salt. I know this. For me, I know that my Twitter usage rate is way down from what it used to be.
Down. Yeah.
And again, that's the way it is with a lot of people that I'm talking to.
And my follower rate, Brad, is also just in passing, is somewhere between 8 and 10% down from its height, and that's only in the course of 4 or 6 weeks or something like that.
My follower rate is down, and the people that are replacing it ain't people. They're clearly bots.
Yeah, a lot of numbers. Yeah, exactly. A lot of numbers in those names.
Yeah, it's like, you're fooling nobody. So between that and the direction Facebook is going, we see a lot of stepping away from social media. Whether that's going to keep going or whether it's going to reverse itself again, we have no idea. But my point is, it's starting to pull back a little bit. And also, I've made the point in the past that your website hasn't gone away and maybe never did. We stopped paying attention to our websites for a good 5, maybe 10 years, but it was still there and it's still a major player. All you've got to do is go back and look at your numbers. Again, ask your Patreon backers how they found out about you. When I did that for me, I got 3/4 of them saying they found out about me through my website, found out about the Patreon. Here's my point for all of that. With all of that in the mix, it really makes me want to double down on what I'm doing with my website. In fact, I think that's going to be a driving force for me personally in 2023, is not only doubling down on my website, but doubling down on some of those more what you and I would call traditional ways of publishing on the web that didn't necessarily hinge on social media, because it might just be that a lot of people that were webcomics fans 20 years ago are going to go back and enjoy that that experience, just because after being on social media for so long, it's going to feel new. And for them, it's going to feel nostalgic.
Wow. Okay. So before I forget, I want to say your question has raised three possibilities in my mind that I want to talk about with nostalgia. One is the excellent one that you just made from a technological standpoint and leaning into websites. Yeah. The second one is people that maybe were cartooning 20 years ago. Their kids are now older. Maybe now is the time to jump back in, right? That's the second one that we can talk about. The third one is for people like myself who do child-friendly comics, in this case, Sheldon. And maybe now is the time to lean into a new collection for people who are now parents who, you know what I mean, who read Sheldon in the past. But let's jump into your first one first with the technical stuff. To reiterate, I am following Brad's lead on this. And Brad was very smart in incorporating Patreon into his website. And just this week, actually, Brian over at Tucheki is starting work on the new Sheldon site. And it has been, friends, just to reinforce what Brad was saying, probably about a decade since I last really worked on that site. And I just want to reaffirm what Brad's saying. I don't know that the website went away, even though my attention to it waned in that intervening 10 years. I had many a friend saying, listen, you've got to design for mobile. And then Brad laterally saying, you've got to incorporate Patreon. I don't know that people, the true readers of my stuff ever really stopped going to my website in a way that I assumed they did, because I was getting more immediate feedback from social media. And so my attention turned to that. But I don't know, Brad, but at the same time, though, like from a technological standpoint, are we kind of saying in this, are we wishfully saying in this, like, you guys, Lycos and InfoSeek and Ask Jeeves, they're all coming back because it's been 20 years. Like, I don't know that I could get people to go back to having a folder of bookmarked websites that they trawl in the morning and then one in the afternoon, like they did in 2001. I don't know that, can we get people to go back to websites, with the caveat that some people never left?
Yeah.
Can you get a 20-year-old to start going to websites is what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, yes, because everything that, yes and no.
Okay.
Go back to websites like we used to on a desktop. Probably not, because we know that 90% of internet users are on their phone. But go incorporate an app, maybe even a new app that has that same experience, because everything you're getting on your iPhone is basically a website. You're just accessing it through an app.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
So
except you've got a few things that are app only, but you see my point. Everything, like, people are like, well, I don't read comics on the web. I read webtoons. Well, that's on a website. You're just getting it through your app. So could there be an app that brings that same experience that is likened to a bookmark, a folder full of bookmarks? Maybe. I don't know. I think it's worth pursuing at this time, or at least kind of doing the thought experiment, because we're definitely right smack in the middle of a period of real upheaval, and that's where the opportunities are.
Okay, so I do agree with you that Webtoons basically just repackaged with their app what is already online. But I don't know that I agree with you that we could lean into an app approach, because anybody who's ever done an app, the constant complaint is the necessary constant need for updates, the security situation that both the Apple App Store and the Google App Store, Android App Store require, the government sort of thing. What I'm getting at is that's not so easy a pass as just putting up a website, is to getting an app store out easily available. But I take your meaning, though, that if you just rebranded basically a home screen bookmark as an app, I don't know how you would do that, but I get what you're saying as a thought experiment. How could we do that? Yeah, there's something to that. But as far as nostalgia goes, how do we, like, you have now a child around this age, how do we get that age saying, you know what, I want to repeatedly go to a website day in and day out, because we are what we repeatedly do, as Aristotle said.
Yeah.
Like, how do we get them to say like, yes, I'm going to step out. I'm going to go, what is this, Safari or Chrome on my phone? I would never use this. I'm going to try to go to this website.
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to it. And I'd be in a different place for sure if I did. My instinct tells me that it goes down to creating content that draws them, right? If you create the kind of content that really brings people in, they will use whatever method they have to get to that content if you're making really good content. So again, when I hear stuff like this, it makes me really want to double down on my writing skills and my art skills and my ability to share information, marketing skills. It makes me want to double down on those three things because that's the first way that you do it. And then the second way, it's one of those things that change is impossible until it's inevitable. This whole idea of how do you get somebody to do it? Well, you get a couple people to do it, and then it becomes more popular when they talk about it, and it becomes more popular. It could just be a different. People might be looking for a change in that's. Let's face it. As soon as I took Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram off my phone, I took a look at what was going on that little black screen, and I was bored silly. I've been doing a lot of reading on Reddit. TikTok is still there, but even TikTok gets awfully redundant, awfully fast. My gut tells me people might be ready for a change in how they're consuming content right now. And I think it's going to be the smart people who are taking that idea and running with it that come up with the next thing that we're going to all be using in 5 years.
Yeah, no, I appreciate what you're trying to do here as a thought experiment of like, how do we get, or how can we best take advantage of this moment? For whatever reason, because I'm normally an optimist, I'm kind of pessimistic about the next 18 to 24 months as being a harder time to reach people. It's just going to be harder.
Oh, yeah.
And so I saying this as a friend, I appreciate what I see right now in you as optimism, like we're going to figure out a way. We're going to do this. We're going to take advantage of this time. And I'm like, I don't know how we're going to do it. But I see what you mean in that we all are going to have to lean into this moment, which is social media is going to start, for a percentage of people, social media is going to stop fulfilling their need in terms of entertainment, distraction, info, all that sort of stuff. And maybe we need to be able to blue sky think what we could do with our websites in order to reach them. And again, I think I go back to Brad's idea of incorporating Patreon, at least so far with the Tucheki system, has been a great way to build an insular community within the website, and have a really welcoming, like, hooray, you're here kind of a thing when someone logs in. So I personally am leaning into that. Outside of that, I'm not sure. But before we go too long on this, let's switch to the other two ideas that I had there, where someone who 20 years ago was producing a comic, and maybe now is the time to revisit that nostalgia. And the second idea of like nostalgia repackaging of things that you might have done or are doing for the next generation now that we're 20 years on. Any thoughts on the first one for people that maybe were producing in 2002?
Tons of thoughts. Because we know folks like this, right? We know people that were doing comics back in the early 2000s, and for whatever reason, they went off and did something else, and now express a certain amount of dismay when they say, you know what? I wish I hadn't left, or if I would have stuck with it, I'd be in a different place by now, and everything. And we see them in different ways, and in different stages of their career, trying to think about maybe starting to kind of get back. If this is you, this is the perfect time to relaunch something. This is I counting on that 20-year nostalgia factor might be a boost. But even if you're thinking about it and you, more to the point, you need an excuse to start, here's your excuse. If you've been sitting there hemming and hawing about this all this time for the last 10 years, thinking, I should have never I should do it. This is a great time to use that thing that you did 20 years ago and kind of use it as an anchor. Yeah. And then push off from that point. If you're looking to get back in, let's say you did a title back in the early 2000s. You could say, you could bring that back and either do a spin-off from that or say, hey, do you remember this? Now I'm doing that. There's any number of things that you could do that harken back to that and then point to the new thing and then there's the obvious one, just restarting the old thing, which, may or may not be the best idea, but it's one of your options for sure. We've in the past kind of told people maybe that's not the best way to go for a whole lot of reasons, like going back to old mistakes.
Right.
But you can't deny it is one of the options that are out there. But yeah, if you're somebody that has that property that was there 20 years ago and you've been looking for an excuse, I'd say here's your excuse.
Yeah, and I would say even if the property is not firing for you, but more the idea of cartooning is firing for you, 20 years on is a wonderful time to do it, in the sense that Brad, you remember that old proverb of the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, but the second best time is now,
Yeah.
If it's been 20 or so years since you last cartooned, boy, has the landscape become easier in some respects to get a webcomic up and launched. In that I don't know, for those of you that remember how tricky it was to get a domain, get the domain hosted, get your files on the domain, figure out an archiving system that was probably custom coded. I mean, there are entire systems. We talked about DreamHost last week as a sponsor in terms of having the one touch WordPress launch and install. There's all sorts of easy ways. And so in that respect, if your life has come around full circle in the last 20 years and you're like, you know what? Yes, I would like to get back into cartooning. It's kind of a great time to do it.
Yeah. And if you're and by the way, if you are somebody like Dave and I that have been doing this all along, this is also a great time to think about maybe a book that pull some of that archive stuff out, right? Yeah, like this wouldn't be a terrible time for the 20 years of Brad Geiger, or we've talked about that 12-page pamphlet that you're going to put out on your 25th anniversary, the big blowout.
The big blowout.
We've talked about that. But no, I mean, honestly, this is not a bad time to keep in mind that here's the thing. We never seem to think about this stuff for ourselves. We always see it in everybody else.
Right,
oh yeah, this corporation is doing it. Mattel is doing it. But those same things work for us. It's just up to our creativity to determine how we're going to make that work best for us.
Well, let me ask you then, because I'm coming up, I think I am now in 2023 in year 25 for Sheldon. In the past, I've poo-pooed that as like, who could imagine a best of Sheldon? But do you think, just offhandedly, should I do a 25 years best of Sheldon book? Is that something that you think has legs?
My answer is the same today as it was.
All
when
right,
we first
this is me being insecure.
Yes,
just answer the question.
Yes.
All right, yeah, okay.
But okay, let's instead of retreading that ground, here's another thing, and you kind of touched on it and snuck up on it a little bit earlier. But this would be a great time for you to repurpose some of your super kid friendly stuff, and put out a book that was aimed at young kids, that the parents would buy for the kids because they remember loving Sheldon, and now here it is for them. Right. Maybe a little bit, even a different format or a different structure, but some way of repurposing that older stuff to a middle grade audience.
Yes.
Or younger. Maybe that's something worth pursuing.
Now, the grimacy face that I was making there was not in response to the idea. It was trying to figure out very quickly the logistics of that. How would you market or land the title for a book like that? Where it's without scaring off kids, how do you say to parents this is for kids? Because as soon as you say this is for kids, kids are like, "Ah, to hell with that. I want to read something for older kids."
I don't want any part of it. Man, I've got nothing. Off the top of my head.
Okay.
I don't know what I would do.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
I do know that's a concern.
Yeah,
that's a concern.
It is. Separately, let's talk about aging for a moment. Are you amazed that we're now 25 years in on webcomics? As you hold up a mirror to yourself. and we find our doctor saying, "Hey, can I publish you? Do you mind if I publish you?"
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I'm convinced we've got defective mirrors at my house. Every time I look into that thing, it's like, this thing is broke.
Hey, I don't know what happened here. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm amazed, especially when I think back on those early, GeoCities days, those early Keen Spot days. The fact that that both of us have been doing that every day, every week, ever since is pretty freaking amazing. It really is kind of mind blowing that we've been doing that for that long, and we've been able to pursue it. It's strange to me. It's very much like, I'll tell you the truth. I don't want to think about it too much, because it's one of those things that if I think about it too much, it's like Dumbo with the feather. If I think about the feather, I'm going to realize that I really can't fly, and I'm going to go plummeting to the ground. I need my feather, and I just don't need to think about it too much.
You're like the Warner Brothers Coyote, that once you've run off the cliff, as long as you don't acknowledge that you're off the cliff, then you won't fall.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just keep running. Just keep running.
Well, the fascinating thing about being 20 years out, 25 years out on webcomics is, people always say to us as a sort of self-defense mechanism, well, it's easier for you guys. You started 20, 25 years ago. Forgetting that the fact that thousands of other cartoonists also started 20, 25 years ago. Just out of curiosity, why do you think those of us still working, you or I or Scott Kurtz or whoever else you want to name, what was it that got us through 20, 25 years? Was it just pig-headedness? Like, I'm not giving up kind of a thing?
Well, I mean, listen, I've joked in the past that it was spite, and that's actually not quite so much a joke, because it was spite. And you can't deny that there's a big part of it that was that I was going to do this because you told me I couldn't do it, and so that's why I'm doing it.
Right.
But also it was passion. Let's face it. You cannot get past the passion part, that even when it wasn't bringing in money, even when it wasn't connecting, I still, for me at least, it was still a passion for this method of storytelling. And that's what got me through most of those early years, was that I just honestly enjoyed it. I see my kids, and they're at that age where they're trying to figure out, what do I want to do with the rest of my life, right? Which is an unfair question to ask somebody in high school when it comes down to it. It's asinine. But it not only is it horrible, but it's foreign to me, because I've never had that question. Since as long as I can remember, I wanted to be a cartoonist. It was my one thing. I didn't want to be a fireman. I didn't want to be an astronaut. I wanted to be a cartoonist. This was it. Yeah. And I was going to do it one way or the other. It wasn't going to be through newspapers. It was going to be through the web. If it wasn't going to be through the web, I was going to go and write them on walls and just wait for people to walk by and make them look at it.
Yeah.
This is what I wanted to do, So yes, spite, undeniably. Spite, big on spite. And passion.
So spite, whenever you say spite, it always makes me laugh, because it's delightful as a joke that you're like, spite is my superpower. But I echo with you on the idea of passion, because I've traveled with you enough over the decades to see that when there is a down moment, when there is a quiet moment, like post breakfast, or like when we're traveling, or like in transit somewhere, the little sketchbook comes out, or I see you sketching or ideating or writing, and it when it's something that's not only our profession, but in a sense also our hobby, which is a weird thing to say, like our downtimes are filled with this. I love it. I love being a cartoonist.
Yeah.
So for 20 years, 25 years, it's been great to do it.
Yeah.
So yes, I agree with you that spite and like, by God, I'm going to do this thing does power us, but you're right that the passion and the love for it is definitely behind it all.
And it doesn't hurt to be a little bit obsessive, right? Because along those lines, like, we're sitting at breakfast while we're up there in Santa Rosa, and you would say something, and then I would come right in with the punchline, and then I would say something, and you would come right in with, an attempt, and we would sit there.
you delightful rat bastard. I didn't even see it coming. I didn't even see it coming.
What? I almost didn't because it felt so mean. You were being so sweet, but it was like, but that's just it. This is the perfect example. We can't not do that shit.
I know.
and it's like, and it's, I got to be honest with you. My wife listens to the show, and I like the fact that I can do that with you because, you know, when I do that with her, she doesn't appreciate it.
Yeah, I was going to say.
And maybe because I don't do it so well, but you know, but seriously, we are both also eternally fascinated by funny, right?
Yeah,
what makes something funny?
Yeah.
How was this funny? How was that funny? And so we're constantly working that shit out, even when it flops. There's never any recrimination when something flops, or you say, "Oh, well, that really flopped." It's like, nah, okay, swing and a miss. We'll go on to the next topic, you know, because we both have that kind of psyche that we're eternally obsessed with what is funny.
Yeah, and it's not just joke writing. We're also, I think we're wired for storytelling.
Yes.
Kurtz one time said something to us at Baltimore Comic-Con that I always remember, which is that his brain thinks dramatically even for his own real life, where when things are going really well, he audibly said something like, now would be the perfect time for blankety blank to happen because that would be the second act twist. And you're like, God damn it, my brain works that way too. I think of real life as a story to be told, and I sort of forecast how, you know, the twist could come, or the turn, or the dramatic build. Yeah. And so I do the same thing in my day-to-day life. And so we're just wired for joke telling and storytelling, I think, at this point.
I have a real trouble with being on the phone with somebody because as soon as they hang up, the narrative part of my brain has them saying, well, that guy was a real asshole. I'm glad I got off the phone with him, you know, and I fill in all this horrible stuff, not because it's horrible and because I hate myself, but because that's the most interesting narrative.
Yeah.
And since we're so steeped in how narrative works, we're constantly filling in all that stuff. Often a narrative is all about conflict with the most conflicting things that we can think of.
That's the thing, is that I think cartooning makes our life more interesting because we are actively trying to find the interest, even in perfectly pleasant moments. Like, what would be interesting right now? Well, the interesting dramatic twist would be if blank, you know, that kind of thing. So, yeah. Anyway, as far as a 20-year nostalgic turn, what an interesting moment to recognize that we're basically at the 25-year mark for webcomics, and nostalgia is the moment of the day there. Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics. So, Brad, do you remember about 3 years ago? This is a quick update for everybody. I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago. I had an older woman come up to my booth at San Diego Comic-Con and go, oh, you know what you need to be doing? You need to go to sci-fi conventions, not Comic-Cons. You need to get this book in front of sci-fi fans. And I was like, well, thank you for the input. I appreciate it. She came back again a second time. So I've been thinking more about you. I wrote down some things of places you should go. Here are the sci-fi conventions. Thank you so much, ma'am. I appreciate that. Comes back a third time. Have you given more thought to going to a sci-fi convention? I was like, no, I haven't really given a lot of thoughts to sci-fi convention. And you had a whole delightful response to the sci-fi convention. Well, so Brad, this past weekend, I did a sci-fi convention, Brad. I went to a sci-fi convention.
Fantastic.
I had not been to one since many, many moons ago. I did a WorldCon with David Malky up in Spokane, Washington. Anyway, this past weekend, I did a science fiction convention, right? I'm there presenting Drive, my graphic novel, which is sci-fi, and I'm there, and a woman comes up to me It goes, what's this? And I go, it's a graphic novel, sci-fi. It's about, but I give her the whole spiel. She goes, oh, a comic. You should maybe do a Comic-Con. And I immediately started laughing. She had no idea, because I was like, the weird kismet of like the same energy, but coming from a different angle. Like, well, instead of being at a sci-fi show, you should be at a Comic-Con. And this was the comparison. She goes, are you familiar with Brewster Rocket in the newspapers? And I said, oh yeah, Brewster Rocket, the science fiction like 1950s spoof comic strip. She goes, yep. I bet that guy does Comic-Con. You should do a Comic-Con. And I was like, wow, first of all, what a reference, Brewster Rocket. And second of all, the fact that someone came up to me, Brad, and said, you should do a Comic-Con instead of doing a sci-fi con.
You couldn't have written it any better than that. That's just
I was amazed.
Perfect. Yeah, that's amazing. I can't believe... Hold on, Dave. You're not going to believe this.
Someone's at the
my
door?
studio door. I can't imagine what this would be. This is. Oh, you wanted to say something? Sure. Well, you can say it in the song. Do you want to be in comics? Draw things in little squares. Conventions with these sci-fi stars and flying cars can fill you with despair. You got some information that wasn't right. This isn't the place for you. You ought to be in comics. You ought to be in comics. Key change. You ought to be in comics with word balloons and gutters. That lady who once sent you here hurt your career. She really was a nutter. She sent you on a goose chase at Warp Drive 4. No wonder you're so damn blue. You ought to be in comics. You ought to be in comics. Brewster Rocket 2. I don't know how that woman got into my studio. It was the same woman that was at your convention. There she goes. Goodbye, lady.
Goodbye,
See you later.
Goodbye. Thank you. Goodbye.
She brought her piano with her.
I wonder, Matt, I'm speaking directly to our editor, Matt. If there's a way to auto-tune that would be great for everyone involved. Oh my God, Brad. First of all, I never having heard that was a straight up delight. Thank you for that. That was amazing. I really enjoyed that. Because I will be honest with everyone on the show. About 5 seconds after it happened, I had to text right away and tell Brad, you will not believe what just happened. That's literally the exact opposite of what happened at Comic-Con. So why is it, do you think, completely separate from this update, why is it, do you think, that everyone wants to send me to the opposite of what they are? As like, this is where you should...
I think you ought to take a hint.
It's basically go away. It's basically you don't belong here. Go away.
I get the same treatment. They come up to me wherever I am, and you ought to be someplace else. I was like, well, all right, I take a hint.
Unfortunately for Brad, it happens at family reunions. They're like, "Hey, have you considered the other side?"
Yes, it does.
Maybe go to your wife's family reunion.
Yeah, I keep having to answer the same question. You're related to us how? And I just gotta carry the family tree wherever I go. No, I think do you think you exude discomfort at these shows where they're trying to help you into another place, trying to find a better fit?
I actually was, because I had time to think about it. I was thinking about what it is about my personality or my presentational, and I think that even though I'm middle-aged now, I think the energy that I give off at a Comic-Con is sort of wide-eyed, cheery optimism, which can read maybe as idiot in terms of like, you don't know. No, I'm being sincere. I'm not joking. Like, it maybe reads as like this sweet. He's very sweet, but he doesn't know what the hell he's doing. I'm gonna turn his shoulders towards the door, and guide him out of here.
He's a lovable buffoon. We're gonna step in and give him a little guidance.
This little sweet peach is a little clueless, so I'm going to guide him down to Comic-Con. Is what I think that's what the energy is that I give off, specifically to older older women that they're like, this little dummy, this little sweet dummy doesn't know what he's doing. That must be the energy, because this is twice now that I've had people do this where they tell me where to go.
That's too funny. Now, my question for you is, as we're this is clearly going to be the last show that you do of the year. Has this changed how you look at conventions in general? Are you planning on any convention appearances for next year at all? Where do you stand on conventions?
Oh, that's a great one. So this was a smaller, more familial, intimate show than I have done probably in 10 or 15 years. And I was taken aback because I had sort of forgotten what it's like to not have 130,000 people around you at a convention, you know? And I think for 2023, the only show that I'm going to do is, I think I'm no longer going to do Emerald City Comic Con. It's been 4 years now that I haven't done it. You, for a long time, tried to talk me out of it. And I think that is, or 3 years perhaps, 3 years that I haven't done it. And I think it's the wiser choice. It's since Reed took it over, it's gotten less, I don't know, magical from what it was when Jim DeMonakis ran that show. Still a great show, still a great artist alley. I recommend it if you're in the Northwest. Still, by all means, do the show. For me, the travel just wasn't worth it anymore, or at least it was becoming less profitable than it was in the past. I'm just going to do San Diego Comic-Con. And I got to tell you, though, Brad, those booths are getting expensive for San Diego Comic-Con. You know, every year it goes up about $100 from my corner booth. And I think, I don't have the number in front of me, I believe I paid $3,600, $3,700 for that corner booth at Comic-Con.
Oh, God.
Right? Like that's a lot of money in terms of, like, I still make a profit, still do great at Comic-Con, but it's just, I see why a lot of younger artists aren't going. It's just Comic-Con has unfortunately priced out the average cartoonist. You know,
how could you possibly be a pro-am cartoonist or a professional cartoonist who's just starting their career and swing that kind of money? You've got it, unless again, you think about some of them who are, and you're like, are you going to make a profit, or is this going to turn into a debt between that and the hotels, which aren't cheap, and the food, which is not cheap,
and maybe a flight, and maybe shipping, and all of that added in? Yeah.
Oh yeah. Don't forget about shipping. Yeah, it's tough to turn a profit at these shows.
So and so keeping in mind that I literally load up a van, drive down to San Diego from Los Angeles. I've got a family place to stay, but it's just, what I'm saying is I'm noticing that price is not getting any smaller, and in fact is getting quite large. And so,
wow.
I just wanted to mention that because I guess what I'm saying is I see you if you're an artist that would love to do a Comic-Con or a New York Comic-Con or an Emerald City Comic-Con, but the booth is just too expensive. I see you, and I don't know that I have an answer for that because I have figured out a way to make a nice, healthy profit at San Diego because it's the only one I do. And for that reason, because I can't make a profit at New York Comic-Con, I don't think. And Emerald City Comic-Con had just gotten too slim a profit. Anyway, the update there is, life's expensive, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Oof. Yeah. Well, and listen, not to be a party pooper, but if you are one of those artists that's like, I'd really like to do a comic convention, but it's too expensive, I got news for you. And that is you're better off. You're better off staying at home. These things were profit centers 20 years ago. They haven't been profit centers for many, if not most of us, for a long, long time. We got to be honest about that. Don't feel like you're missing out. Don't get FOMO over these comic conventions, because the chances are you're better off.
Absolutely. Well, jumping back into the show, Brad, I wanted to say, remember a minute ago we were talking about nostalgia or that period of nostalgia around the 20-year mark, and we started talking about cartoonists that maybe didn't make it in the same 20, 25-year run that we did. I wanted to ask you along those lines, because I think I know what your answer is going to be here, but in your mind, what is more important for an artist to have? Talent or stamina?
Ooh. Between talent and stamina.
Yeah, talent and stamina.
Which is more important
which would you rather have, talent or stamina?
Depends on the night. But listen,
God bless America.
That was my Paul Lind take. Okay, I've got the answer. So the question is, what's the better between talent and stamina? And the answer, I think, is skill. And I want you to bear with me for a second, because between talent and stamina, what you want is skill, because talent is being good at something. Stamina is being able to do it for a long time. skill is the concept of doing it for a long time and continually getting better at it as you go. And so if you had a choice between talent and stamina, I'd want you to focus on skill, which is the best of both worlds.
Well, thank you.
Keep going and
yeah.
keep going, and you continue to get better at it.
Thank you for dodging and reformulating my question into an answer that you wanted to give.
I totally Kobayashi Maru'd you there.
You did Kobayashi Maru.
If I couldn't come up with my own third answer, I'm going to say it's stamina, and basically for the same reason, because again, it's hard to get worse at something the more you do it. And it's hard to get worse at something you do every day. So stamina is more important, because if you can keep going and if you can keep pushing forward and if you can keep pushing yourself along that same path, the talent and the skill is going to come along with it. So if you had to choose between the two, and it's basically just a reformulation of what I already said, stamina is more important. Talent is only going to get you so far. Talent is finite. Talent, you've only got so much talent. Once you're done with that talent, you're done with it. You've got to do something beyond talent. Stamina gets you where you're going.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I have just a slightly different formulation for this, which is talent doesn't lead to stamina. In many respects, stamina leads to talent. And by seizing your stamina with time and effort, you'll get to, if Brad wants to formulate it one way, you'll get to skill, or looked at another way, with 10% talent and 90% stamina, you'll get over the course of a decade to 100% talent, and then hopefully keep the stamina up. I also think that it's and the reason why I bring up talent versus stamina is a lot of people look at their art, they get done drawing a piece of paper, and then they start clicking around the web or social media, and they go, I'm not that. Oh, I don't have that. Oh, I'll never be able to draw that. Oh, I wish I had that. When honestly, the same thing that got you to pick up that pencil or that digital pen and draw the drawing in front of you, that same energy will, with time and repeated application, get you to talent, get you to where you want to be. It might take you more than 5, 10, 15 years. I'm not sure. But I honestly feel like lean into the fact that you have the impulse to draw, because the impulse to draw is the same thing that will give you the impulse to have stamina, repeatedly doing a thing, going back to it, and in so doing, get better at repeatedly doing it.
Yeah. Well, I was listening back to one of our old shows. By the way, Dave, we're delightful. But I was listening back to one of our old shows, and basically we had come up with a metaphor for building a career in comics, and we said it's like building a sandcastle, one grain of sand at a time, and knowing that you're building it very close to the shore. There's a lot of that metaphor that holds true. And the fact of the matter is, as we said at the time, if you're going to build a sandcastle that way, you've got to really, really love sand, because you're not going to see the castle for a long time. But you've got to really love sand, and you've got to really love that activity of building something a grain of sand at a time. And that's all about stamina. That's this passion, which is turning into a theme of the show. We've got kind of a theme show because all of these connect. That's where that passion comes in. That keeps you firing up that tablet, keeps you pulling a clean sheet of Bristol board across your table time after time, is that passion for doing it and trying to push yourself to continually be better and better and better. Because stamina is not just about repetition. It's not just about doing it over and over again. That's repetition. Stamina is about continually doing it over and over and over and pushing yourself and trying to get better and
with intention.
Yes. It's an active thing. Repetition can be somewhat passive. You can just do it on a reflex. But stamina is this idea of continuing to do things and then looking at that stuff from 10 years ago and saying, okay, I can see, where I need to get better. I can see where I need to maybe do some more work on my writing. I need to do some more work on my graphic storytelling, those kinds of things. Listen, not for nothing. I think there's a big danger in being told you're talented, and especially being told you're talented too soon. You know, because what happens is you inevitably go out into the world and you're told as a kid, and I've seen this like in school growing up, somebody was told they were gifted, right, and talented, and they just had a natural acumen for this thing. And then they go out into the world and they get plotzed by somebody who's inevitably better than they are. And they don't know what to do with that because they've never had to work at improving their skills because they were told they just got born into it. They're just talented. Hey, you're a talented guy. I think there's a real danger in talent. I would much rather focus on stamina.
Well, and I'm about to say something, and it's going to sound braggy, but I'm actually saying it so that because it's truly encouragement from my mind, not braggy, which is Brad and I talked about all the people we were coming up with that didn't survive. And I will tell you that in that 20-year period, there were many people, some that are immediately popping into my mind, that were infinitely more talented than I was.
Oh, yeah.
And were recognized in webcomics as being a far better artist. What amazing natural talent. Oh my gosh, this person's going to go places. And yet they're not drawing anymore. They're not doing it anymore. And so I only mention that because you right now are feeling insecure about your art. You right now are feeling like, oh, there's far better people. I don't deserve to be doing it. Or I'm a joke compared to these other people. Let me tell you, the repeated action with intention of sitting down to work and working to improve and doing it every day or doing it every week, that's going to be a far better skill set for you going forward than having that natural talent. Yes, you're jealous of natural talent. I'm jealous of natural talent. Even now, 25 years into my career, I'm still like, oh, I wish I had that. But I know that with time and effort and with continued work to improve, you can get there. And that's kind of a wonderful thing. That's the bit of encouragement that I wanted to get you is you may not be there now, but with stamina, with repeated intentional working, you'll get there.
Yeah, and it's important to remember because so much of our culture kind of gives us a mythology of achievement, right? Like every part of our culture, number one, celebrates the young wonder kid, right? Which we know is
the big hits under 30 or kind of thing. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, the child prodigy, the 30 under 30 magazine articles that we always see. We always are presented with that young achiever. And even though we know that for 99% of us, it takes time to get good at something because of course it does, right? Yes, there's some people that are just born with this amazing knack for doing something, but they're very rare in actuality. Right. The truth of the matter is it takes a long time to get good at something. And we're also I've gone back to this example so many times in our culture. We don't focus on getting good. In a movie, we hit the fast forward past that.
We do montage,
that in a 30-second training montage that we just skip. We don't want to even know about all the work. We just want to get to the part where we're good. And I think that has effect on us psychologically.
God, you're right. Yeah.
We all of us want to hit the fast forward button to the part where we're good, right? But life doesn't work like that. Life is nowhere near that. It takes a long time to get good at something. When speaking of nostalgia, one of the things that we were very concerned about when we first started doing this stuff on the web was I know for a fact there was a lot of people that were scared of sharing their actual age because they always wanted to seem like a young, hip creator, and they didn't want anyone to know how old they were. They didn't want to see any gray hair. They were always using an older avatar. And I love my gray hair. I love the fact
you're a sharp salt and pepper. You're a sharp.
That's right.
Very sharp
That's right. I'm a gray fox over here. And I also have no problems telling you I'm 52 years old. Those were 52 amazing years. And I got a whole bunch in front of me. But it took me a long time to get as good as I am. And as good as I think I am, and believe me, there's days I think I'm pretty good. I've still got an awful long way to go. I'm going to be even better at 65, right? Because I know this is a progress thing. So I think we don't encourage that kind of thought process often enough. That it takes time to get good, and even if you think you're good now, you're going to be so much better in another 5 years.
Absolutely. Well, it's funny. I didn't anticipate walking down this path with you conversationally, but I want to say, first of all, thank you. And also I want to say that we've also seen this, which is in terms of a life of emotional stability and finding
Yeah.
peace with who you are and what you do and how you create, I have seen that the application of time and stamina and continuing to work over 5, 10, 15 years and maybe not having yet a hit, but getting a hit after the application of 10 years of hard work, rather than the people that had instant talent and had a hit right away. I will tell you that the emotional strength and the skill set of being able to have worked through a decade is oftentimes a really valuable way to have a more contented life. Even though the 22-year-old version, even if it's just the emotional version, 22-year-old of ourselves, wants the hit right now. Yeah. It coming after 5, 10, 15 years, and maybe not even being a hit, maybe just doing well, that can lead to a very sort of happy contentedness in your heart that the sort of flash of the pan might not know, because they got it too early. They didn't have the emotional skill set. And then they're always chasing that dragon for the rest of their life afterward. Yeah. And I've seen actual genuine unhappiness from that, for people that hit it big in their 20s and frankly didn't have the emotional skills for it. And then also were chasing the dragon for decades later. It's just, I think you will be happier that you have stamina right now than natural talent. And so what I'm saying is I'm encouraging you to go forward with confidence in that, because in some respects, it actually makes for a happier, or at the very least, a more contented artist with time and practice.
Yeah. Yeah. I go back to anime all the time, because anime will set you straight on this kind of stuff because they don't do the training montage. So much of anime is about that journey, right? So much of My Hero Academia is the main character on his way to becoming the top hero. It's not, he doesn't have a 30-second montage. He's got season upon season of slowly developing. I can't recommend anime enough to give you another idea of what success looks like, because that, by and large, overwhelmingly, that storytelling is about enjoying the journey. And again, you got to enjoy the journey. If you're not loving what you're doing right now, you're probably doing something wrong, because let's face it, during those, going back to that nostalgia from 20 years ago, that's all we had in 2001, 2002 was the enjoyment of doing it.
On one level, that a little bit sounds like we were happy with the delicious hickory sticks we were served for dinner, and that's all we had, and it was great. No, but I want to say something that just to share in the moment. Brad was talking about enjoying the process, and I want to say that last night I fell asleep, and today I woke up with the same thought in my mind of, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, I'm excited for what I'm going to draw. That doesn't happen every day. I just want to say to everybody that doesn't, but I just want to share that moment that, like, I'm 48 and I'm 25 years in my career, and I'm so excited for what I'm going to draw today. Like, I know in my mind's eye, I already have an image for what I'm going to do. And boy, I hope it's going to work out. I'm really going to work at it until I get it right. It's nice to have that joy still at 48, that, like, I'm really excited to sit down at the drawing table and draw today. And that's a unique and wonderful thing. It's totally separate from talent and stamina. How wonderful to have that joy for the process. Like, I don't know what people are going to react to it. I hope they're going to react to it nicely, but I'm excited just to make it, you know?
Yeah. And it's that making it that brings you that joy. And frankly, Dave, making this show with you brings me joy week after week. And that's why I'm filled with joy that we've had another episode of ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
What a transition. And I will say your hosts have been my friend Brad Geiger, the editor of Webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And my good friend, the consummate professional Dave Kellett, the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped, and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And the ComicLab theme song, which you should go check out the work of, is from permission by Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by the ever-wonderful Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love ComicLab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, where we're still one of the top comics podcasts, depending on the day. We're still right there at the top, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode.
And ComicLab is made possible by your kind support over at patreon.com/ComicLab. And I thank you all so much as we come into the end of the year for your continued support on Patreon. Yeah. It is a fantastic community. The Discord server, I'm honestly, there's not a week that goes by that I don't learn key things about my own business. So thank you for that. And I will go ahead and say it twice, patreon.com/ComicLab. Can I just say, Brad, in the spirit of Christmas,
yeah,
I've known you now for 2 decades. I find it very hard to shop for a Christmas gift for you. I never the years that I've gone big swing, I was like, nah, that was just so. And then the other years where I was like, I spent 5 seconds on a gift, I was like, hey, that turned out great. You're very hard for me to shop for, and I don't know why that is.
Well, listen, you shouldn't be shopping for me at all. You don't need to give me a Christmas present, but I will tell you
great.
this.
All right, good. Then I'm off the hook. All right.
Yes.
That's all I wanted was the dispensation to be like, I don't have to shop for Brad. That's great.
You know, can I be honest about that? Because I was talking about this to my mom not 5 or 6 days ago. She used to just piss me off so much, and my grandparents too, because I'd say, hey, what can I get you for Christmas? What would you like? And she'd like, all I really want is, peacefulness around the house, good memories, come over for a visit, and it would be stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, just give me something I can buy. just give me something I can put a credit card down and send it to you. I can't give you, happiness in the home because, half of us are always fighting with each other. I can't give you any of this other stuff, but it kind of comes to a certain point that, and you're probably the same way, that most of the stuff that you want, if you want it, you went out and got it,
Yeah. I mean, here's the funny thing about us as friends. You and I both have a perfect skill set for gift giving in the sense that you and I could sit down at a drawing desk and draw the other one something incredible and spend time on it. But both of us deep down are like, that's fine. Here's the thing I bought for you.
It's so much easier to do something that has a gift receipt.